I would say, the first decision you have to make is whether you want things to be better or worse. And it seems to me that better is a better aim. And if that's what you want, then you can orient yourself to becoming fully on board with that. That's your motif. And I would say that's love in the religious sense, is that love is the desire that all things flourish. And you might think that's evident. It's not evident. This is hard because things are difficult. It's easy to become spiteful and bitter and resentful, and to be self-denigrating and not to work for your own furtherance because you're ashamed of who you are, deeply ashamed, maybe even ashamed to be human. The destructive species that we are, constantly raping the planet, that self-loathing can go very, very deep. So this is hard. But that's the first thing. Do you want things to be better or worse for you and for the people around you? It's so that's your goal, to make them better. Perhaps that's your goal. When I was a clinician, that's what I was always working on with my clients. It was I'm on the side of you that's aimed at making things better. No unconditional positive regard, because there's going to be parts of you that are working at counter purposes to that, and we're not on their side. They're to be judged and dispensed with, not in a contemptuous or dismissive manner, but with the knowledge that those elements of your personality are not serving the goal. And that doesn't mean that might be bringing them on board. So if you're aggressive, that can serve the good. That can make you persistent and committed and immovable, all those things. And then the next thing I would say is, watch for resentment, arrogance, and deceit. They're your enemies. And see if you can reduce the influence they have over your life. And then that's where you have to watch and feel, am I lying? Is this self-serving? Is what I'm saying making me weak? Can I feel that? Am I insisting that I'm right? Because I'd rather believe that I was right than learn. Am I taking revenge in a resentful way? Those are good questions of conscience. It's highly probable that you're doing that in many places. Maybe you can dispense with that carefully over time and see what happens. So it's worth running the experiment.
Yeah. And putting our everything into it, because that's where we'll really learn, by giving that endeavor.
Well, that's a good aim. It's a good aim, but you can start with even a little couple of percents of you aim towards that. You can start badly. And that's a useful thing to know too, is you can improve your life a little bit at a time. And it's very difficult to be all in. We talked about that earlier. Who knows who you could be if you were everything you could be? That is a limitless case. What would it be like if you stopped doing all the stupid things that you're doing and took advantage of all the opportunities that came your way and aimed at the highest good? Who knows what you could be? You could certainly be more than you are. Everyone knows that, I think, and everyone suffers that knowledge. It's from that their feelings of inadequacy spring. That can be pathologized too. I know people can be way harder on themselves than is actually good for them. That's not what I mean. It's hard to distinguish between those even, but it can be done, I think. With regards to anger, I don't know towards what or how to get rid of it. Well, something a cognitive behavioral therapist might recommend is for a week, and maybe this is already a therapy you've been through, but this exercise is generally quite useful. First, you have to note when you're angry and admit to that, and maybe you have to practice that. So you have to decide, I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to see when I'm angry, and I'm going to admit to it, at least to begin with, without judgment. I'm just going to observe it. I'm going to allow myself to observe it. Then you have to allow yourself to see what angry thoughts you have. And you can ask yourself that. What angry thoughts do I frequently have, they'll likely come to mind, maybe many of them. You can jot all those down. Those are ones you're familiar with. And then you can notice when you're angry and you can ask yourself, well, what am I thinking right at this moment? What angry thoughts am I thinking? And some of them might be quite shocking. It might also manifest themselves in destructive fantasies. You know, maybe you have a fantasy of grabbing somebody by a shirt collar and pushing them up against a wall, or dumping, hot coffee on your boss, or some impulse towards aggression that might manifest itself as a flashing fantasy. And perhaps one that you're shocked by and don't want to admit. You don't want to admit to the existence of it, but you need to see what's happening first in your own imagination if you're going to cope with it. It's also possible that a fair bit of the anger that you have is actually useful if you could just find out what it is and what it's directed toward. So the first tack is to explore the anger. What gives rise to it? What situations give rise to it? What people give rise to it? What are you doing when it happens? And what is the phenomenology of the anger? How does it make itself manifest in image, fantasy, and thought? And then now you have an anger inventory. Is anger in this situation warranted? What steps do I have to take in order to become less angry? And sometimes that might be an adjustment of an internal psychological adjustment. Sometimes it might require changes in the world. Maybe you're in a relationship that's oppressive, and you have been for a long time. And the way to fix that isn't to adjust your attitude, although it could be, but it might be that it's time to get out of the relationship. And so, differentiation. When are you angry? What elicits it? Why are you angry? Who are you angry at? What are the nature of the angry thoughts? What are the nature of the angry fantasies? All of that. You have to get that out where you can see it. Then you have to walk through it. And you can do that by yourself. You can do that while writing. You can produce counter thoughts. So if you're angry about something, you could outline the reasons why anger is not productive, or you could outline the reasons why it's productive and the reasons it's not productive for a full exploration of the issue. So then I would ask you too, if you're angry all the time, is, well, are you depressed? Have you been evaluated clinically? If this is a major problem, is it a manifestation of depression? Because anger is an underdiagnosed symptom of depression. Do you have well thought through goals and plans and strategies? All of that. That's a more comprehensive evaluation of your entire life. And maybe you have something to say or do that you're not saying or doing. It's highly probable. Most of us have that problem. I'm in this unbelievably fortunate circumstance where people tell me about the steps they've taken to make their lives better in wonderment. And they allow me to see that. And it's very intimate, and it's stunning. I'm walking with a friend of mine quite regularly, and he's a tough guy, man. He's worked with delinquents his whole life. So he's like a social worker superhero. Very physically tough person, and a very masculine male, but a social worker and very caring. And he's been very helpful to me, and he's been walking with me every day, and people are stopping me. And the other day, this guy walked by us on the street, and he was pretty run down. He was probably in his mid-40s, and he's kind of street person looking, And he stopped and he looked at me and he came over and he said, "I love you." And I walked away, and my friend said, "You sure have a lot of men coming up to you and saying that they love you." And I said, "Well, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what to make of it. The behavior is so completely unusual." And, my wife too, she said she's seen a whole different side of men, especially since we started touring because of this happening, because generally when people approach me, and they're not invariably men, but they probably are 70% of the time, they're very polite and very careful. And she said that showed her a whole side of men that she didn't even know existed. And so it's something. But I do believe that people, I do believe that my experience has been that there isn't anything that, I guess two things. There isn't anything that's more rewarding than trying to do things right. All other forms of reward pale by comparison. They're not even in the same conceptual universe. And there's nothing that's more adventurous than telling the truth. You have no idea what will happen to you if you tell the truth. And so if you're looking for an adventure, boy, that's an adventure.